There is a place at the edge of the world where silence feels alive, where the wind does not merely blow but speaks, carrying echoes across an endless expanse of white. Greenland. From the sky it appears almost unreal, a vast frozen canvas stretching beyond the horizon where ice and light merge into something timeless. Icebergs drift through dark Arctic waters like ancient monuments, carved not by human hands but by pressure, time, and the quiet persistence of nature. Some rise like towering fortresses, their jagged edges glowing under a pale sun. Others glide low and smooth, their true mass hidden beneath the surface. Here, sound is swallowed by space. Footsteps crunch against snow, then fade into nothing. The wind hums across frozen fjords, sculpting the surface into waves of ice that ripple and shift with every storm. Beneath it all lies a deeper stillness, a silence that has endured for thousands of years. And yet, Greenland is not empty. It breathes through its extremes. In winter, darkness settles like a veil, and the sky becomes a stage for the aurora, shimmering curtains of green and violet that dance across the heavens. In summer, the sun refuses to set, casting a golden glow over melting ice and awakening landscapes long buried beneath snow. This is a land shaped by contrast, light and darkness, motion and stillness, survival and fragility. Beneath the ice, ancient rock remembers a world long before humanity. Along the coasts, life clings to narrow strips of land, where people and animals endure conditions that test the limits of existence. Greenland is not just a place. It is a story written in ice, a story of deep time, of shifting climates, of resilience in the face of extremes, a place where the past is frozen beneath your feet and the future is already beginning to melt. Greenland is the largest island on Earth, a vast and formidable landmass positioned between the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans. At first glance, it seems defined entirely by ice, but beneath that frozen surface lies a geological history that stretches back billions of years. The foundation of Greenland is among the oldest on the planet. Its bedrock forms part of an ancient continental core known as a craton, remnants of Earth's earliest crust that have remained stable for immense spans of time. In some regions, these rocks are over 3.8 billion years old, offering a rare glimpse into the formative stages of our planet. Long before it became an isolated island, Greenland was part of massive supercontinents. It once lay connected to North America and Europe within the ancient landmass of Pangaea, and later Laurasia. Over millions of years, tectonic forces slowly pulled these continents apart. As the Earth's crust shifted and fractured, Greenland drifted into its current position, surrounded by deep ocean basins. Its coastline tells the story of ice. Greenland is deeply carved by fjords, long, narrow inlets formed by glaciers cutting through rock over thousands of years. These fjords stretch far inland, some extending hundreds of kilometers, their steep walls rising dramatically from cold, dark waters. They are among the most striking features of the landscape, shaped by the relentless movement of ice during past ice ages. Along much of the coast, rugged mountain ranges stand in sharp contrast to the smoother interior. These peaks, worn yet resilient, mark the edges of the island's ancient geological framework. In certain places, they break through the ice sheet as isolated outcrops known as nunataks, small islands of rock surrounded by a sea of ice. Despite the dominance of the ice sheet, not all of Greenland is permanently frozen. In the south and along parts of the western coast, the land opens into tundra during the warmer months. Here, rocky terrain, shallow soils, and sparse vegetation create a stark but dynamic environment shaped by seasonal change. Rivers formed by melting glaciers carve their own paths through this landscape, carrying sediment and fresh water toward the sea. Over time, these processes continue to reshape the island, even as ice remains its most defining force. Greenland's geography is not static. It is a balance between ancient stability and ongoing transformation. Its rocks tell a story of deep time, while its surface continues to evolve under the influence of ice, water, and climate. At the heart of Greenland lies one of the most powerful natural systems on Earth, the Greenland ice sheet. Covering nearly 80% of the island, this immense body of ice is second only to Antarctica in size. In some areas, it reaches depths of more than 3 kilometers, its weight so great that it depresses the land beneath it. If the entire ice sheet were to melt, global sea levels would rise dramatically, an indication of just how much water is locked within this frozen mass. But the ice sheet is not still. It is constantly in motion, though the movement is slow and often imperceptible. Snowfall accumulates on its surface year after year, gradually compressing into dense ice. Over centuries, this ice begins to flow outward from the center, driven by gravity, moving toward the edges of the island. This movement gives rise to glaciers, rivers of ice that extend from the interior toward the coast. Some glaciers advance only a few meters each year. Others, known as fast-flowing outlet glaciers, move at remarkable speeds, carrying vast quantities of ice toward the ocean. When these glaciers reach the sea, they fracture and break apart in a process known as calving, producing icebergs that drift into the North Atlantic. These icebergs are more than just striking natural formations. They are visible signs of a dynamic and changing system. Greenland's climate plays a crucial role in shaping the behavior of its ice. Located within the Arctic, the island experiences extreme seasonal variation. Winters are long and dark, with temperatures dropping far below freezing. In the northern regions, the sun disappears entirely for months, creating a polar night. In contrast, summer brings continuous daylight, the midnight sun, allowing temperatures to rise and surface ice to melt. This meltwater can flow across the ice sheet, forming streams and lakes before draining through cracks to the base, where it can accelerate the movement of glaciers. The interaction between the ice, atmosphere, and ocean creates a complex climate system. The bright surface of the ice sheet reflects a significant portion of incoming solar radiation, helping to regulate Earth's temperature. This reflective property, known as albedo, is a key factor in maintaining the planet's energy balance. However, as melting increases and darker surfaces are exposed, more heat is absorbed, further accelerating warming. Ocean currents also influence Greenland's environment. Warm waters from the Atlantic reach parts of its coastline, interacting with colder Arctic currents. This exchange affects both sea ice formation and the rate at which glaciers lose ice to the ocean. In recent decades, scientists have observed profound changes in Greenland's ice system. The ice sheet is losing mass at an increasing rate. Glaciers are retreating, and the melt season is becoming longer and more intense. These changes are not isolated. Greenland is a critical component of the global climate system. Its ice, atmosphere, and oceans are interconnected with the rest of the planet. What happens here influences weather patterns, sea levels, and ecosystems far beyond the Arctic. In this frozen landscape, the balance between accumulation and loss is shifting, and the consequences are being felt worldwide. In Greenland, life does not follow the gentle rhythm of temperate lands. It moves instead in extremes, defined not by gradual change, but by dramatic transformation. Winter arrives like a long, silent exhale. Darkness settles across the island, especially in the far north, where the sun disappears entirely for months. Temperatures plunge, and the land becomes a frozen expanse of snow and ice. The ocean forms a shifting skin of sea ice, locking coastlines in place. On land, movement slows. Energy is conserved. Life retreats inward. Yet the Arctic is never truly still. Beneath the frozen surface of the sea, ecosystems remain active. Fish navigate dark, cold waters, while seals maintain breathing holes in the ice, creating vital links between ocean and air. Even microscopic organisms continue their cycles, forming the unseen foundation of the Arctic food web. Then, almost without warning, the balance shifts. Spring in Greenland is not gradual, it is sudden. Light returns first, spilling across the ice in long, low arcs. Temperatures begin to rise, and the rigid stillness of winter fractures. Snow softens. Ice cracks. Water begins to move again. By summer, the transformation is complete. The sun no longer sets, circling endlessly above the horizon. This constant daylight fuels a burst of biological activity. The tundra awakens, revealing patches of green and bursts of color where only white once dominated. Rivers rush with meltwater, carving channels through rock and soil. Marine ecosystems explode with life. Nutrients stirred by melting ice support plankton blooms, which in turn feed fish, birds, and marine mammals. Coastal areas become dense with activity as animals gather to feed, breed, and raise their young during this narrow window of abundance. Birds arrive in great numbers, migrating from distant continents to take advantage of the brief Arctic summer. Their calls fill the air, breaking the silence that defined the long winter. But this abundance is fleeting. As autumn approaches, the light begins to fade. Temperatures drop once more, and the landscape prepares for another cycle of cold and darkness. Animals migrate or store energy. The tundra loses its color, returning gradually to a muted, frozen state. This cycle, darkness to light, stillness to movement, is the heartbeat of Greenland. Every organism is bound to it. Survival depends not just on endurance, but on timing, on the ability to adapt to a world where life exists in brief, intense moments between long periods of silence. At first glance, Greenland appears almost lifeless, a frozen desert of ice and stone. But look closer, and a different story begins to emerge. Life here is not abundant, but it is extraordinary. The flora of Greenland is shaped by limitation. The cold climate, short growing season, and thin soils restrict what can survive. Trees are rare, growing only in sheltered areas where summer temperatures briefly allow them to take root. Instead, the landscape is dominated by tundra vegetation, low, resilient plants that hug the ground to escape the wind. Mosses and lichens form dense carpets across the land, playing a critical role in retaining moisture and stabilizing soil. These simple organisms are among the most important in the Arctic ecosystem, providing food for grazing animals and forming the base of terrestrial life. Among the more visible plants are dwarf shrubs and hardy species like Arctic willow, crowberry, and blueberry. These plants remain small, often only a few centimeters tall, but they are remarkably efficient. In the brief summer, they grow, flower, and produce fruit with astonishing speed. Berries, such as crowberries and blueberries, are not only vital for wildlife, but have long been part of the human diet in Greenland. Despite the harsh environment, Greenland hosts around 500 species of flowering plants, along with hundreds of mosses, lichens, and fungi. This biodiversity, though subtle, is finely tuned to the Arctic climate. Animal life is equally specialized. On land, species are few but well adapted. Musk oxen roam the tundra, their thick coats protecting them from extreme cold. Caribou migrate across inland regions, feeding on lichens and grasses. Arctic foxes, small yet resilient, change the color of their fur with the seasons, white in winter, brown or gray in summer, blending seamlessly into their surroundings. Along the coasts, life becomes richer. Seals are among the most important animals in Greenland, both ecologically and culturally. They inhabit icy waters, relying on sea ice for rest and survival. Walruses gather on ice floes, while whales move through coastal waters during the warmer months. At the top of the food chain stands the polar bear, an apex predator perfectly adapted to the Arctic environment. Dependent on sea ice for hunting, it symbolizes both the strength and vulnerability of this ecosystem. Bird life flourishes during summer. Seabirds nest along cliffs and coastlines, while migratory species arrive in vast numbers to breed. Much of Greenland's animal life is marine. The ocean provides stability and resources that the land cannot, making it the true center of biological activity. Here, survival is not about abundance, but about adaptation. Every plant, every animal, is part of a delicate system shaped by cold, light, and time. Long before modern maps named this island Greenland, it was home to people who understood its rhythms intimately, who lived not against the Arctic, but within it. The Inuit. For over 4,000 years, Inuit communities have inhabited Greenland, developing a culture defined by resilience, precision, and deep respect for nature. In a land where survival is never guaranteed, knowledge became the most valuable resource of all. Hunting and fishing were not simply activities, they were lifelines. The Inuit relied on marine mammals, fish, and land animals for food, clothing, and tools. Seals provided meat for nourishment, skins for warmth, and oil for light. Every part of an animal was used, reflecting a way of life built on balance and necessity. In an environment where resources are limited, nothing could be wasted. This relationship with nature extended beyond practicality. It was spiritual. Inuit traditions often view animals as beings with their own spirits. Hunting was guided by respect, ritual, and an understanding that life was part of a larger cycle. To take an animal's life required acknowledgement, gratitude, and adherence to cultural practices that maintained harmony between humans and the natural world. Tools and technologies reflected this deep connection. The kayak, light, precise, and perfectly adapted to Arctic waters, allowed hunters to move silently across the sea. Harpoons, crafted with skill and care, were designed for efficiency and survival. Even shelters, such as snow-built igloos, demonstrated an extraordinary ability to use the environment itself as protection against the cold. But Inuit culture is not only about survival, it is about storytelling. Stories passed from generation to generation carry knowledge, values, and identity. They speak of spirits, animals, and forces of nature, blending observation with imagination. Through these narratives, the Arctic becomes more than a landscape. It becomes a living world filled with meaning. Food traditions also reflect this culture. Dishes such as fermented seabirds, known as kiviak, illustrate both ingenuity and adaptation to long winters when fresh food is scarce. These practices are not merely culinary. They are cultural expressions shaped by centuries of experience. Today, Inuit life in Greenland exists at the intersection of tradition and modernity. Snowmobiles may replace sleds in some regions, and global influences reach even remote communities. Yet many traditions endure. Hunting, storytelling, and cultural identity remain deeply rooted in the past, even as they evolve in the present. The Inuit do not simply live in Greenland. They belong to it. Their culture is woven into its ice, its animals, its seasons, an enduring testament to humanity's ability to adapt, endure, and find meaning in even the harshest corners of the earth. In the late 10th century, long before modern maps charted the Arctic, Greenland entered the written history of Europe through the voyages of Norse explorers. Among them was Eric the Red, a figure as formidable as the land he sought to settle. Exiled from Iceland, he sailed westward into unknown waters and reached Greenland's rugged shores. It was he who gave the island its enduring name, Greenland, perhaps as a hopeful promise, or perhaps as a calculated attempt to attract settlers to an otherwise harsh and unforgiving land. And settlers came. Norse communities established themselves along the southwestern coast, where the climate was comparatively milder. Two main settlements, the eastern and western settlements, emerged as small but resilient outposts of medieval Europe. Here, the Norse farmed livestock, raised sheep and cattle, and hunted seals and caribou. They built churches, traded with Europe, and maintained a fragile connection to the outside world. For centuries they endured. But Greenland was never an easy land to inhabit. Its seasons were unpredictable. its resources limited and its isolation profound. The Norse depended heavily on trade with Europe, particularly for iron and timber, resources scarce in Greenland. When these connections weakened, survival became increasingly difficult. At the same time, the climate itself began to change. The onset of the Little Ice Age brought colder temperatures, shorter growing seasons, and expanding sea ice. Conditions that were once marginal became severe. Farms struggled. Trade routes became more dangerous, sometimes impossible. There were also encounters, direct or indirect, with the Inuit, who were far better adapted to Arctic life. While the full nature of their interactions remains uncertain, it is clear that the Inuit thrived where the Norse struggled. By the 15th century, the Norse settlements had vanished. No single explanation tells the whole story. Climate change, isolation, resource scarcity, and cultural rigidity all likely played a role. Unlike the Inuit, the Norse did not fully adapt to the Arctic environment. Their way of life, shaped in Europe, proved difficult to sustain in Greenland's shifting conditions. Their disappearance remains one of history's quiet mysteries, a reminder that even determined settlers can be undone by a land that demands adaptation above all else. Today, Greenland stands not at the edge of the known world, but at the center of global scientific attention. Its vast ice sheet has become one of the most closely studied natural systems on Earth. Scientists drill deep into the ice, extracting cores that preserve layers of snowfall accumulated over hundreds of thousands of years. Within these layers lie tiny bubbles of ancient air, frozen records of past atmospheres, temperatures, and climate shifts. Through these ice cores, Greenland becomes a time machine. But research here is not only about the past, it is about the present and the future. Modern satellite systems now monitor the ice sheet with extraordinary precision. They measure changes in elevation, track glacier movement, and detect shifts in mass over time. These observations reveal a clear trend. Greenland is losing ice at an accelerating rate. Over the past 3 decades, the ice sheet has lost trillions of tons of ice, contributing measurably to global sea level rise. The loss is not uniform. Coastal glaciers are thinning rapidly, and melt events are becoming more frequent and intense. Research stations scattered across the island collect data on temperature, snowfall, and atmospheric conditions. Oceanographers study how warming waters interact with glaciers from below, while climate scientists model how Greenland's changes influence global systems. What makes Greenland unique is its scale and sensitivity. It responds quickly to shifts in temperature, making it one of the most important indicators of climate change on Earth. What scientists observe here helps refine predictions, inform policy, and deepen our understanding of a rapidly changing planet. Greenland is no longer remote in meaning. It is central to the story of Earth's future. Greenland is changing, and the pace of that change is accelerating. Rising global temperatures are driving increased melting across the ice sheet. What was once a slow, seasonal process is becoming more intense, more widespread, and more unpredictable. The ice sheet has been losing mass continuously for decades, and projections suggest this trend will continue throughout the century. This loss carries global consequences. If the Greenland ice sheet were to melt entirely, it could raise global sea levels by several meters. Even partial melting is already contributing to rising oceans, threatening coastal communities around the world. But the impact is not limited to sea levels. Fresh water from melting ice is flowing into the North Atlantic, altering ocean salinity and potentially disrupting major ocean currents. These currents play a critical role in regulating global climate, meaning changes in Greenland could influence weather patterns far beyond the Arctic. Ecosystems are also under pressure. As sea ice declines, species that depend on it, such as polar bears and seals, face shrinking habitats. Seasonal cycles are shifting, affecting migration patterns, breeding, and food availability across the Arctic. For human communities, particularly the Inuit, these changes are deeply personal. Traditional ways of life, shaped over thousands of years, are being challenged by a rapidly transforming environment. Yet Greenland is not only a symbol of loss, it is also a place of awareness. What happens here is visible, measurable, undeniable. The future of Greenland reflects the future of the Arctic, and in many ways the future of the planet itself. At the edge of the world, where ice meets ocean and silence stretches beyond imagination, Greenland endures as both a monument to Earth's past and a signal of its future. It is a land shaped over billions of years, carved by glaciers, and sustained by rhythms that have long governed life in the Arctic. Here, every crack in the ice, every drifting iceberg, every shifting season tells a story of resilience, of balance, of survival against the odds. Yet that balance is no longer certain. The same forces that once shaped Greenland slowly and silently are now accelerating. Ice that took millennia to form is melting within decades. Landscapes that seemed eternal are beginning to change within a human lifetime. And still, Greenland remains profoundly beautiful. Its frozen horizons, its aurora-lit skies, its quiet, powerful presence, these are reminders of a world both distant and deeply connected to our own. A world that does not shout, but whispers. In that silence, there is a message. Greenland is not just a remote island of ice. It is a reflection of nature's strength, of its fragility, and of the responsibility we carry in a changing world.